Let's move on to our second question now, which I'm going to pose to Philippe at Nimiq. So, as we know, Nimiq is a native blockchain whose mission from day one is to enhance interoperability. Nimiq is interesting as it's a browser-based blockchain, which is written in JavaScript, and because of this, the complete blockchain runs in the browser. So, Philip, can you talk about some of the problems that Nimiq is trying to solve in terms of payments and simplifying sending monies across borders to the previous discussion, and how it connects existing payments architecture with new cryptocurrency blockchain-based infrastructure?
Sure, thank you. I hope you can understand me well, because my internet connection is breaking up a little bit at this time. But I'll just go from here, and you can stop me if there are any issues. Okay, so yeah, here at Nimiq, we, as I said initially, we try to build cryptocurrency for humans to make decentralized systems more usable. One issue that we see today with cryptocurrencies is that they are inherently difficult to use, and many users actually resort to centralized solutions that make it more convenient and more easier for them to cryptocurrencies. But of course, unfortunately, by doing so, they sacrifice a lot of the nice properties that we get from crypto, one most notably self-custody. And our mission is to basically compete with these centralized services on a usability level without actually compromising on the decentralization of the underlying technology. So we really want to maintain all the nice decentralization properties that we have in crypto, and not take any centralized shortcuts, and really try to enable average users, average humans to use cryptocurrencies the way they were intended to be used. And that's what we are working on, to remove these barriers, to make crypto more accessible, to make crypto maybe even more interoperable with humans. And one of the our focus that we have here at Nimiq is payments, crypto payments. We really trying to get people to, or to enable people to actually pay with cryptocurrencies, ideally at any point of sale, or any payment that you can imagine, any real world payment. And on the one hand, what we do is we provide our own layer 1 technology. We have our own blockchain that we built and designed from scratch. And for payments, we of course need a scalable and very cheap layer 1 tech that enables this payment use case and all the applications that we want to build on top. And also this blockchain, or this layer 1 tech that we are designing, is built with usability in mind. So one example of that would be that the blockchain is actually, the full blockchain can actually run in a browser. So all a user needs to do is basically open up a web page, and the client that runs in the browser will connect to the blockchain directly without using any intermediaries, without any proxies or gateway nodes that are required to actually get access to the network. And that way we get an actual decentralized client running in the browser without having the user download or install anything. So that was one of the ideas behind having a blockchain that works in the browser. But besides this, the blockchain itself, or the layer 1 tech itself, we are also building and developing usable applications on top of that tech, and try to solve real pain points when it comes to actually using crypto. So we don't only want to provide the blockchain tech itself, but we also want to provide the full round trip. So get it, hold it, spend it, basically. How do I get in and out of crypto if I have no crypto at all? If I'm coming from the fiat world, how do I get in and out? How do I hold it in a self-custodial way? And also how do I spend it at the end of the day, and can buy real world products with my crypto? And what I want to focus on here today as part of this panel is basically our solution, or one of the approaches that we are pursuing as to how do I actually get crypto with fiat, or how do I exchange between crypto and fiat, so the old and the new world, in a way where where I'm not relying on a centralized party to facilitate that exchange, which is currently the de facto way to get in and out of crypto, right? On your Coinbase, on your Kraken, that's basically the way that users are buying crypto from fiat nowadays. And so centralized exchanges, they support fiat. That's currently the way that it's being done. But also there's of course a bunch of decentralized exchanges that have better properties than centralized exchanges from a crypto point of view. But unfortunately, decentralized exchanges nowadays, they don't really support fiat. But what they do, and what we find a lot in DEXs, is that they basically enable exchange between crypto assets that also live on different ledgers, right? So of course, we have DEXs that basically just stay on one ledger, do ERC20 to ERC20 exchange on Ethereum, for example. But there are also a number of established techniques that allow exchange across different ledgers, and that's basically an interoperability a problem within the crypto space itself. So how do I allow this decentralized exchange between different ledgers? And there are plenty of ways to do that, and I'm sure we're also going to hear some more later in this panel. But the one that we focused on are cross-chain atomic swaps. And the nice thing about cross-chain atomic swaps is that they just rely on one simple payment, one simple primitive, a programmable escrow, or a conditional payment, so to say. In technical terms, a hash time lock contract, which is a smart contract that is supported by a number of blockchains. And this very primitive allows exchange between two compatible blockchains, or makes those blockchains interoperable, without actually requiring knowledge of the interoperable part. So I can basically swap between any two blockchains that support this conditional payment primitive, and I don't actually have to connect them in an explicit way. So if I want to swap between Bitcoin and Ethereum don't need to know about each other, even though they are interoperable. Right? And what we did is basically the key idea was to take this established mechanism, which already works well in a decentralized exchange setting in the crypto space, and transfer this interoperability mechanism back to the fiat off-chain world. So in a sense, to build a interoperability layer between the crypto world and the fiat world, where we sort of wrap the existing infrastructure that exists in the fiat world today, and sort of simulate the behavior of a blockchain system on top of that existing infrastructure without actually introducing a blockchain. So it is not a revolution of how fiat payment work, but it's basically a retrofit to the existing system to make it compatible with the blockchain world in a most lightweight way, because you can basically use this and set this up without changing your underlying infrastructure. And so ultimately, this compatibility layer makes off-chain assets behave as if they were token on a blockchain. And with that mechanism, it allows us to basically plug in off-chain assets into the existing decentralized exchange infrastructure. So the idea is that what you could traditionally do crypto to crypto, you can now do crypto to fiat. And so we call our scheme Nimiq Oasis, the Open Asset Swap Interaction Scheme. And what we've basically done with that scheme is to kind of specify an API or a protocol that trusted financial institutions can implement, or basically any sort of trusted entity that can hold and transfer an asset that we want to connect to this compatibility layer. And this scheme sort of is kind of a proposal on how such an interface could look like. And the idea is that we get as many banks or financial institutions to implement this scheme, such that we are not relying on a single bank offering the scheme, but have ideally like a multitude of banks and escrow agents that the user can choose from to actually make it decentralized. Yeah, I mentioned that the scheme works on cross-chain atomic swaps. I'm not going to go into the technical details, see how that works, but the core idea is basically to have, instead of having like one centralized exchange that basically takes custody of all the assets that are being exchanged. If we have two parties that want to do an exchange, they don't trust each other. Essentially, the idea is to basically set up two escrows. Every party, both parties pay their funds into those two escrows, and the escrows are set up in a way, or the conditions of the escrows are set up in a way that basically they both release the funds under the same condition, which kind of allows to atomically release either both funds or none of those funds without actually giving them to one single escrow. Yeah, as I mentioned, the only thing that we need is basically this conditional payment primitive, basically a payment that will only be forwarded to the designated recipient once a particular condition is met. And the idea behind the scheme is that, or one of the ideas is that it basically retains the current trust model that we have. So basically, if we think about the fiat world as also as a decentralized ledger, maybe, then we can think of it as a sharded proof of authority kind of blockchain, where individual banks have parts of the ledger, and they can basically modify that ledger because they are trusted. And we are pushing basically the enforcement of this conditional payment, or we are pushing that escrow functionality to the banks, which are of course trusted entities in the fiat system. So we are basically in line with the current trust model, but we are also not improving on it. And another nice property is that it's basically completely blockchain or crypto agnostic. So we are only adding basically this conditional payment functionality to fiat by having a bank offer that functionality. And that way we are already interoperable with crypto without actually doing anything with crypto, right? So the provider of that interface will never have to connect to a blockchain or even know anything about a blockchain. It's really just a very simple primitive that stays completely within the fiat world. And that already basically gives us interoperability with any kind of blockchain that has the same payment primitive. So, so what can we do with it? So basically, this whole thing is a kind of a building block for DeFi apps. So for example, one prominent use case would be fiat on-off ramps. So for example, we have in the Nimiq wallet, which is a self-custodial browser wallet, we've integrated a way for a user to buy and sell crypto just by sending a SEPA instant transaction to our partner bank that is offering the service. And a user can basically, without any registration, buy crypto from their bank account using a non-custodial exchange scheme in under 5 minutes without any registration or anything. And selling works the same way. But we are also envisioning this to be, of course, integrated into DEXs, but we can also imagine OTC desks using this, or we could even have a remittance service that connects several instances of this scheme that in banks or financial institutions around the world, and can basically do atomic swaps in between those banks and entities. Yeah, and we are basically we have basically implemented this already. We have partnered with a German 1031 bank to offer this service to European customers. And all it requires is right now is a SEPA instant capable bank account. This is the infrastructure that we have built this on top of. And yeah, we have done several months of open beta, and the system is working really well. And the public launch is actually right around the corner. And yeah, I think this is one of the contributions that Nimiq is making in terms of interoperability and how to connect the new and the old world.
Thank you ever so much for that. That is really, really interesting. It seems that you folks at Nimiq eat, live, and breathe interoperability with the work you're doing. And look, it would be remiss of me as an individual that runs a trade body not to bring in a discussion around regulation, especially around banks. We know that it's really difficult, especially in the UK, for crypto native businesses to partner with banks, even to receive basic banking services. This is a big issue for our industry. And we know, as you mentioned, that centralized exchanges are the only way to on-ramp fiat. As somebody that wants to buy crypto, decentralized exchanges offer a great amount of variety around swapping different types of assets. However, what I see you trying to solve is the bridge between the fiat world and the world of decentralized exchanges and DeFi in general, which is lacking. Naturally, stablecoins are dominating the decentralized finance space. But what can I sort of just follow up, Philip, with where do you see the sort of direction of travel with regards to such issues that are pretty big in the community that I know you'll be aware about around anti-money laundering and terrorist finance, and how governments and especially centralized authorities, intergovernmental agencies such as Financial Action Task Force are really focused on this issue of increasing flows of funds now. To quote DeFi Pulse, we're nearly at 100 billion of total value locked in or assets under management in the DeFi space. Is this something that you think you can solve, and how are you guys thinking about this?
I mean, generally, I think that public blockchains are probably good for anti-money laundering, basically. So generally, by being able to observe what's happening on the blockchain, I think that actually has great advantages in terms of tracking flows of funds and doing anti-money laundering. When we were setting up our service, we are of course also faced with these regulations. So what we are doing right now is basically we are just limiting the amounts that you can transfer through our interface when you're not registered. So we basically have this free non-KYC version, which is limited to 1,000 euros per month. And we basically have a bunch of heuristics that try to identify, as a single person and to enforce that limit. And if you want to, go beyond that limit, you will actually have to do proper KYC, and we'll do all the AML checks that are necessary. Yeah, but I also have to admit that I'm really not an expert on regulation at all, but more of a technical person. So I really cannot. I really would have to speculate how regulation and AML is going to develop. So I'm sure maybe other panelists can say more with respect to this question.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a very interesting next few months, and I have a wrap-up question regarding how our panelists see the future. But we're kind of coming into the last 10 minutes now. So we've got some questions that I'm just going to pull up here. So thank you so much to our attendees. First question for Philip, and thank you, Janice, for this. Atomic swaps have limits regarding hash algorithm. What are your thoughts on Aphelion algorithm, excuse my pronunciation, that proposes interoperability on blockchain level between any public and private chains?
Okay, well, certainly hash timer contracts aren't like the perfect primitive. I mean, it's been around for quite a while, and there are some drawbacks to it, but it is an established interoperability primitive. So this was basically the first mechanism that we adopted for our open asset swap interaction scheme. But generally, we are not limiting this scheme to only using hash time lock contracts as a means of exchange. but it is certainly within the scope of the scheme to add other mechanisms or other primitives to the scheme to open up or to be even more interoperable or have more interoperability with other chains that, for example, don't support hash terminal contracts. With respect to the Aphelion algorithm, I'm actually not familiar with that particular algorithm, but so I cannot really speak to whether that would be a suitable way to look at or for a suitable interoperability way that we could include in OASIS. But as I said, we are not limited to HDLCs, and maybe Aphelion could be an interesting option to look at to you know, have a different mechanism that we can integrate into OASIS.
Thanks, Philip. And you have another one. You're very popular today. People love the work you're doing at Nimiq. Is it possible for a bank to use a Uniswap pool? This is a liquidity pool on Uniswap as a source of liquidity for a fiat/ERC20 exchange via Nimiq or OASIS. So final part of this question, can you buy an ERC20 token via your bank account?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so providing liquidity is not part of OASIS, right? OASIS is really just the basic primitive that enables the interoperability. And for our solutions, we have built our own liquidity provider on top of OASIS in order to enable users to purchase and sell cryptocurrencies at any time, so that there's always liquidity. So what tokens or what coins you can actually buy via OASIS really depends on, you know, what your liquidity provider actually provides. Or I mean, there can also be a number of different liquidity providers that make use of OASIS, since it's a completely open technology. Anyone can basically use OASIS as a building block for their service. So it should be perfectly possible to build a liquidity provider for ERC20 tokens. Whether that is actually whether we're actually able to model that as a Uniswap pool, I'm not certain at this time. I would have to look into that to assess the technical feasibility of that particular idea. But generally, OASIS can be used for any sort of exchange between fiat and any token, as long as someone actually, you know, builds a liquidity provider for that particular asset that we want to swap with fiat.
Thanks, Philip. Just another question for you, if I may.
Sure.
Whether you better answer this, what will the future fee level for OASIS Infra as a massive ramp enabler into stablecoin world be?
Okay, so for our first OASIS instance that we are offering with 1031 Bank, we have a 1% fee on all OASIS transfers. But of course, the scheme doesn't really dictate what the fees are or what the fees should be. So any OASIS provider is basically completely free to choose their own, you know, fees that they want to take for the service. And there's certainly also the will to kind of bring these fees down to basically a level that kind of just covers the cost and to really offer a low cost bridge between fiat and crypto, also when it comes to onboarding into stable coins, for example. Yeah.
Thank you.
So right now, 1%.
1%. And one would assume that that's much more competitive than some of the fees we see for transferring fees cross-border. And that's one of the great use cases for the industry in terms of being able to send funds cheaply and seamlessly. Another question here for you, Philip. Do you know when it will be possible to register as a power user for OASIS?
So we are right now building the KYC portion for the power user onboarding. In our current hackathon, that's basically what's being worked on, and so we are right now in the implementation phase. So it's probably going to be a couple of more weeks, maybe a few months, until we have the power user feature for OASIS live. But this is what we are working on right now.
Thank you. Well, I think last few minutes we'll just have a nice wrap up and some closing comments from the panel. I heard on an earlier panel today at the Blockchain for Europe conference, somebody was discussing how in the world fairs of previous centuries, the organizers would try and get participants to tell us what lied ahead in the future. So I'm going to go around each of our panelists and pick on you to sort of give a nice little wrap-up overview of your personal view of where we see the future, specifically around blockchain evolution in everything we do, much like we saw 20 years ago with the birth of the internet and the first protocols coming into force. And who'd have ever thought we would just be using the web ubiquitous in our lives? Yeah, just really a crystal ball question, if I may. So anything goes here. Nobody's going to hold you to this. We're not going to watch this back in 10 years and say you're wrong.
So I actually very much share the vision that Jens shared. So I'd really love to see, you know, cryptocurrencies adopted as a real alternative to fiat currencies, as a actual means of payment, you know, to bring cryptocurrencies from that nerdy tech niche and from that speculative object that it is currently to turn it and then to give it into the hands of, you know, ordinary average people, and to enable them to use cryptocurrencies just like they're using their MasterCard nowadays, right? And with the difference of actually being a very inclusive system that is accessible also, you know, to people and communities that right now don't have access to proper payment infrastructure and that are excluded from the global transfer of value. So I think that's actually where cryptocurrencies can really shine, and I hope that you know, people will see some of that happening in the future.